Hey guys, alright? Welcome everyone. The story begins after a global catastrophe, at a time when several religious groups renounced what they call the sin of speech to purify themselves. A young woman named Azrael is picking fruit with a fearful demeanor, constantly looking around. Her boyfriend is a boy named Kenan, and the two seem to be fleeing from someone. Seeing him trying to warm himself, she becomes very anxious and immediately extinguishes the fire with her cloth, fearing someone has seen the smoke. As scolding cannot be verbal, she has to express her anger through shoves. Kenan follows her, regretful, and the two soon make up. He even receives a gift from her, a rustic bracelet made of twigs. Then the two hear a rhythmic whistling that grows louder. Trying to determine where the sound comes from, they run in the opposite direction and try to hide. The whistling continues to get closer, and it is not safe to wait there, so Kenan decides to check another path. She doesn't want to separate from him, but eventually agrees. Alone in the woods, she panics at the enemy's proximity and runs away. As soon as she tires, a man in dark clothing surprises her. Trying to escape from him, she collides with his accomplice and is soon captured. As the two carry her to the car, she is devastated to see that Kenan has also been caught. He tries to react, but a woman pulls out a sharp machete to ensure his obedience. The two men shove Azrael into the trunk and chain the lid shut. Still communicating through whistles, the group divides between the two cars. During the ride, Azrael attempts to free herself in every possible way, to no avail. Arriving at a specific point in the forest, there are two more people waiting, facing away from a chair. The place appears to be a kind of altar, and except for the victim, everyone behaves solemnly. Dragged to the chair, Azrael is forced to sit down, and the men tie her arms. One of those with their back turned is Josephine. She approaches Azrael with a blade and makes a cut on her calf. Afterwards, the group moves to a small rise in the terrain and begins a bizarre ritual, synchronizing their breathing and making gestures to accompany the rhythm. The wind seems to respond to this performance, and the daylight grows slightly dimmer. Right above Azrael's head, there is a clothesline filled with cans and empty bottles, like an immense mobile. She notices something moving a few meters away, unable to identify what it is. This approach is reflected in the group's breathing, increasingly frantic as the shape advances toward the altar. Azrael realizes that she is being offered as a sacrifice and continues to struggle relentlessly. When the creature steps into the light, we see that it is a humanoid form whose body appears completely burned. Finally, the girl manages to free an arm, and one of her captors rushes to restrain her in time. He doesn't notice that a slat from the chair has also come loose, getting caught on her sleeve. When he bends down to tie up the victim, she decides to use this to her advantage. Azrael attacks the man before he can tie her up again, and he stumbles out of the clearing in terrible shape. The man ends up being attacked by the creature and soon begins to be eaten by it. Without stopping to watch this horror show, Azrael frees herself and flees. It takes a long time for the rest of the cult to realize what has happened, and by this time, the monster is already taking their companion away. Azrael only stops running when she is far away and feels that her enemies will not catch up with her anytime soon. Exhausted and panting, she limps to a stream to tend to her wounds. The relief of having saved herself is not much comfort compared to the loss of Kenan. Moreover, the danger has not passed, and now she is completely alone. She crosses the stream and collects some plant leaves to make a bandage for her leg, not noticing that she is being watched. Another humanoid creature is approaching her. The thing walks with awkward movements that leave its body all twisted. Azrael only realizes the presence when she hears its equally strange sound, like a horse cough. At least, this creature is not very agile and cannot see. Azrael discreetly steps aside, trying to find a hiding place. The monster continues to drag itself wherever she goes, sniffing for its prey. Then, she remains still and presses on the wound on her calf to prevent the odor from spreading. Losing the scent, the creature walks away. Free once again, Azrael continues her journey until she notices tire marks on the ground. She follows the trail and arrives at a kind of camp. The place is a large cluster of disordered tents, and there is no one in sight except for the lookout. On tiptoe, she approaches the makeshift fence and starts to remove the debris. As soon as she manages to clear a narrow passage, she lies on the ground and crawls into the camp. Sneaking between the tents, she accidentally bumps into something. The noise attracts the lookout's attention, but fortunately, he doesn't pay much heed. Azrael continues with the invasion and hides behind a car. She then notices the twig bracelet fallen right next to the chains. This confirms that Kenan has been there, just as she feared. Right at that moment, Josephine appears with one of her acolytes. Azrael hides again and waits until Josephine is distracted to get closer. Spying on her enemy, she sees her attending to her mother, who seems very ill. After that, Josephine goes to a wooden house that is the only building in the camp. When she opens the door, we see that it is a kind of church. The benches are crowded, and the worshippers move strangely back and forth. The church's decoration consists of crude drawings on the wood, and there is a woman who seems to be praying in front of a hole in the wall. Her name is Miriam, and when she turns sideways, we see that she is pregnant. Josephine watches her with apprehension, also looking at the illustrations of children. Some worshippers are crying, and the overall atmosphere is tense. The wind blows inside through the hole in the wall, producing a horrifying sound. Miriam only extinguishes the candles when the sound ceases, and then she realizes that Josephine is there. She holds her belly with an anxious look, waiting for information. Shaking her head negatively, Josephine communicates that the sacrifice has failed. People begin to leave the church while Miriam tries to process the news, very shaken. As soon as the church becomes empty, Josephine approaches her with an expression of sorrow. Miriam greets her with a hard slap to the face and a look of great disappointment. Then the two hear something outside, and Miriam goes to the window, but there is nothing. The drawing in the center of the altar shows a blonde female figure being consumed by the flames of hell. Josephine steps back, still lamenting letting the victim escape. Little does she know that Azrael is right below her feet at that very moment. Hidden in the space under the church, she watches the other leave and becomes distressed to see that she is not leaving. Josephine walks around the church slowly, as if inspecting the perimeter, perhaps looking for intruders. The girl shrinks behind the beams, losing sight of the enemy, and is startled to hear the wood creaking near her. Suddenly, Josephine's face appears among the rags. She crawls quickly and grabs the girl's legs before she can escape. With her hands around her neck, Josephine tries to choke her, but Azrael strikes her head and follows with a precise kick. She manages to escape, but now the camp is full of people. Azrael barely has time to run behind the tents, and Josephine starts ringing the bell, raising the alarm. Others begin to imitate her, banging on pots and cans to spread the warning that there is an intruder among them. One of the men spots Azrael running for the fence and alerts the others. She gets hurt on the barbed wire traps but manages to get to the other side just in time. The man tries to do the same and gets stuck. Then Josephine comes to the fence and orders them to shoot, but fortunately, they barely miss their target. Once again, Azrael finds herself running through the forest with her life in danger, only stopping when she is on the edge of exhaustion. Panting, she leans against a rock without noticing that her hands are wounded and the injuries are exposed. Seconds later, one of the creatures is already licking the stone. Horrified by the scene, the girl tries to sneak away slowly, but this time there is a second creature, which is much faster. The monster closes the distance with each step, and Azrael only saves herself because it falls into a hole before it can catch her. However, she barely takes 2 steps before another scare knocks her down. With a strong light in her face, she realizes she has come to a road and has just avoided being run over. When the driver gets out of the car, she does not recognize him. Furthermore, he does not seem ready to throw her in the trunk but rather is worried about her well-being. Stranger still, this man is talking. This makes him an immediate ally, even if she doesn't understand a single word. He cannot be a member of the cult if he speaks. Without wasting time, she hops into his car, frantically signaling for him to hurry. The driver tries to understand what is happening and keeps asking questions, but communication is impossible. Preferring not to contradict the girl, he agrees to give her a ride. In the car, he notices that her hand is injured and offers a bandage. Gesturing to make himself understood, he encourages her to speak as well, but she shakes her head firmly. Then he also notices the mark of a cross just below her neck and suspects that the situation is stranger than he thought. Her eyes fill with astonishment when he turns on the radio, and it seems she has never heard music in her life. The experience is not bad at all, and she soon starts swaying her body to the same rhythm, enjoying the rare moment of fun. The driver smiles, pleased to have found a way to connect with her. At that moment, something crosses the windshield and hits his head squarely. One of Josephine's henchmen is in the middle of the road, shooting at the vehicle. The driver's foot presses down on the accelerator, and the car careens out of control, running over the shooter before crashing. Azrael survives the accident but can barely limp out of the car. She is nearly fainting when she sees that the shooter has also survived. This is the last straw for her, and all her energy returns in a burst of anger. Charging at him, she tries to suffocate him with the weapon, and the two roll on the ground until they face each other again. He pulls the trigger, but the gun seems to have jammed, so he decides to use it as a club. Azrael bravely endures the blows until she reaches a rock, delivering 2 hits to the aggressor's head. This doesn't kill him, but it buys her time to unjam the gun. As he tries to knock her out with a chokehold, she struggles to position the barrel and then fires, finally defeating her opponent. She moves away from the accident scene, taking the weapon with her. A few meters ahead, she sees a man sitting under a tree with a fire at his feet. She stays alert until she gets closer and recognizes Kenan. He is in very bad shape and seems to need help. The anguish of rescuing him makes Azrael forget all her precautions, and she steps into a trap, being hoisted by a rope. She hangs upside down, swinging back and forth in the air. Her boyfriend starts signaling with his head, indicating that someone is coming. The lookout from the camp arrives first. The first thing he does is grab the gun from the ground and hit Kenan, who loses consciousness. But then that wind starts to blow through the trees, and the lookout seems to become frightened. While he looks around, Azrael tries to give a push and grab the rope, but to no avail. Her palm is practically scraped after all this. The bandage is even dripping on the ground, which is very dangerous in this forest. Not just for her, of course. Suddenly, the lookout is attacked by the creatures that appear quickly and ferociously, realizing too late that one should not stay close to sacrificial people. His face is dragged across the trunk, and then the creatures start to tear it apart. Finally managing to right herself on the rope, Azrael watches the banquet from up in the tree, safe. The savagery is so intense that she cannot even think of divine justice at the moment. Moreover, Kenan is still on the ground, completely defenseless, and nailed to the tree. Once the lookout is finished, the duo of monsters turns to him. The couple can only exchange one loving glance before the first bite. One of the creatures frees Kenan while the other scales the tree to grab Azrael. The monster chases her until the two balance on a branch. The huge mouth is drooling over her when she finally manages to lasso the monster with the rope and pulls it off the branch. The two fall, but only she hits the ground, while the creature takes her place on the gallows. Prostrate next to the fire, Azrael has difficulty breathing, but she knows there is no time to recover. With great effort, she gets up and grabs the gun again. Instead of fleeing or going back to the road to look for another friendly speaker, she returns to the camp. From behind a tree, she begins to whistle, imitating the communication signals of the cult. Both the lookout and the shooter have not returned, and those in the camp still do not know that this will never happen. Therefore, there is a chance to deceive them with the imposter's whistle. The plan works, and soon there is movement near the fence. A man named Leon comes to the front of the group with a lantern, and Josephine is right behind him. Whistling back, he hears the expected sound and continues communicating with the intruder, thinking he is interacting with an accomplice. The group advances into the forest, leaving the fence unprotected. Azrael then sneaks through the same opening as before. The camp appears deserted, but these people are very quiet, and the tents may be full of people. Therefore, she crosses the stretch to the church very cautiously and climbs the steps without making a sound. Opening the door, she sees that the church is almost empty. The only person inside is Miriam. Azrael walks up to the altar, determined to pull the trigger but hesitates when she sees Miriam's pregnant belly. Miriam gazes at her future baby with an angelic expression, feeding the intruder's doubts. Then she knocks the gun from Azrael's hand with a swift movement and delivers a frying pan blow right to Azrael's forehead, knocking her unconscious. Minutes later, she wakes up and realizes she is being carried by Leon and Josephine to a grave. Several people are already around, eagerly awaiting the sacrifice. Leon takes care to dirty her face even more so the creatures won't be fooled. There is a wooden coffin at the bottom of the grave, and Azrael is thrown inside. When she hears the dirt pounding on the lid, panic begins to take over her. She pounds on the boards with all her strength, but it is useless. The dirt keeps pouring down, and now no light enters through the cracks in the wood. Then she hears the sound of a lever and realizes that the end of the coffin has been removed, revealing a dark tunnel. They are guiding the creatures to her, ensuring there is no escape. With few options, she prefers to explore the tunnel instead of waiting for her fate in that coffin. She crawls several meters without incident, but soon a humanoid shadow appears against the light, forcing her to turn back. Running back to the coffin, she lights up the horrific being at her feet. When it advances over her and growls right in her face, Azrael makes a point of growling back. But the monster's behavior is even more surprising. Instead of biting the girl, it merely presses a finger against the palm of her hand, sharing with her a series of visions. The scenes flood her mind and seem to show an alternate version of the recent events. She sees Miriam being ruthlessly attacked and the church being destroyed by flames. Then the creature leaves. On the surface, Leon is with his girlfriend while Josephine visits her mother. Before long, everyone retires to their tents, more at ease now that the sacrifice has been fulfilled. No one is near the grave when Azrael's hands push against the edge, lifting her body out. Inside the church, Miriam is alone in the sacristy, applying compresses. She hears the front door creaking and the sound of heavy footsteps coming in her direction. Luckily for her, it's just Josephine checking to see if she's okay. But soon, a suspicious flash appears, and the two hear the chaos outside. Stepping out of the church, Josephine can hardly believe what she sees. Her mother's tent is on fire, and it's not the only one. She rushes to try to extinguish it, hoping it's not too late. Some of her companions bring buckets of water to help, and Leon rings the bell to alert everyone. Watching how the fire spreads, Josephine understands that the blaze is not accidental. And upon seeing the first person fall, she also concludes that someone caused this chaos before starting to shoot. Leon's girlfriend is the only one who saw the intruder's quick figure, but her counterattack fails, and the girl becomes another casualty of the cult. Leon is forced to settle for a quick goodbye as the flames spread throughout the camp. Josephine is also hit and cannot get up. Few of her goons are left capable of defending the group, and Leon seems to be one of the last. He spots Azrael when she tries to hit him, but they both miss their aim. When she starts whistling again, the echo leaves Leon disoriented, unsure of where the sound is coming from. He roars in anger and begins shooting at anything that moves until he sees a body drop. His victorious smile fades as he discovers he hit one of his allies. Azrael takes advantage of the distraction to finish him off too, cutting off his head. She then calmly traverses the ruins of the camp, passing by Josephine without paying her any mind. Now there is only one person left for her revenge to be complete. Stepping firmly on each step, she ascends to the church door and enters. There is no one in sight, but as she takes a few steps forward, Miriam emerges from her hiding place with a cleaver in hand. She disarms Azrael with the first blow and begins to chase her through the church benches until she manages to grab her. About to lose her head, Azrael saves herself with a trip that knocks Miriam down, but not for long. She continues dodging the cleaver strikes until she manages to corner Miriam against the wall and bite her neck, revealing her recent connection with the forest beings. The shock is so great that Miriam's bag bursts. Then, a shot blasts the enormous crucifix suspended from the ceiling, and we see Josephine has recovered. She limps into the church while Azrael curls up behind a bench for protection from the gunfire. But her determination wavers upon seeing Miriam in labor. The bite mark is clearly visible, horrifying Josephine. Azrael seizes this chance to knock her down, and the two begin a brutal fight, using the church's debris to strike each other. Miriam is moaning in pain when Azrael manages to bring the cleaver down on her foe. Her last moments are filled with joy as they can already hear the baby's cries. Josephine does not live long enough to hear the cries slowly transform into a bestial howl. Miriam backs away from the sacristy in panic, not taking her eyes off it. Devastated upon facing the truth about the fruit of her womb, she bids farewell to this cruel world with the knife Azrael dropped. Then the haunting wind returns, and we see dozens of creatures converging to the same point in a kind of macabre procession. Azrael begins to approach the sacristy as the newborn oscillates between baby cries and a demonic lament. The creatures arrive at the camp, and some are already entering the church. The film ends with Azrael emerging from the sacristy with something in her arms, wrapped in a blanket. Upon seeing a tiny hand coming out of the wrapping, the creatures release a collective scream of joy. It is only then that we see what the newborn truly is. The being born has a humanoid appearance but a bestial head with horns. However, Azrael does not let go of it, on the contrary, she holds it as if it were her own.